We good to go, Will?
Yeah, we're live streaming, Chairman, so whenever you're ready.
Does help if you are mute. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's overview and scrutiny meeting. It's a nice cold evening outside, so at least we're hopefully all at home and reasonably warm. This meeting is held remotely, and I can read out the reason why. The Local Authorities and Police and Crimes Panel Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Meetings, England and Wales Regulation 2020, which came into force on Saturday, the 4th of April 2020, to enable councils to hold remote committee meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic period. This was to ensure local authorities could conduct business during the current public health emergency. This meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being held remotely under these regulations via the Zoom application and is being recorded live and streamed on YouTube. So again, good evening, everybody. Good evening to anybody who is watching us. And a very good evening to David Lloyd, Police and Crime Commission. And I believe Stuart Orton has joined us. Is that correct, Stuart? Are you here? I can see you. I'm guessing you're muted, but I can see your name flashing up, so I'm hoping that you are here and you can hear us. So if we move on to the agenda, item 1, apologies. Peter, I don't think we've had any.
No, we've had no actual formal apologies, but there are a couple of members joining a little later on. But you know about that already.
Lovely, thank you. I don't know, do you want to do a quick roll call, Peter, so that
yes,
so as the public know which members are here?
Okay, I'll say your names and show your hand to the screen. Councillor Wiley, Chairman.
Here.
Yeah. Sophie Bell.
Present.
Yeah. Mary Brady, not on yet, I don't think. No. Ruth Buckmaster. Yeah. Alexander Curtis, can't see him at the moment. Ian Devonshire.
Present.
Yeah. Holly Drake.
Present.
James Frecknell.
Present.
Yeah. Vice Chairman Moni Goldspink.
Yes, I'm here.
Dan Hollibon will be joining. Jonathan Kay.
Yes, good evening.
Yeah. David Snowden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maurice Stevenson will be joining. Norma Simons.
Yes, here.
And then we've got a couple of substitute members on here. We've got Alistair Ward Booth.
Here.
Yeah. David Andrews, I think, is just joining. Yeah. And then Ben Crystal.
Yeah.
Yeah, then officers, myself, Will Troop is the host. And I think that's it. And then we've got the Police Crime Commission, David Lloyd. And Stuart Orton on phone. Can you hear us, Stuart?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can. Thank you very much. Right, thank you for that. Chairman's announcements. I don't believe I've got any, so we will move on to declarations of interest. Does any member have any declaration of interest? No, thank you. Sorry, I've missed the previous minutes. I've jumped. I do apologise. Previous minutes. Are we happy to approve the minutes of the 3rd of November?
By proposal, please.
Yes, I'll propose.
Mine is seconded by Ian. All those in favour? Yeah, that's carried. Thank you. Now, item 5, presentation by the Police and Crime Commissioner, David Lloyd. So if I pass over to you, David, and if you and Stuart do whatever you want to do. Thank you.
When I was chatting about this earlier with Stuart, I said that the way that it always runs is if there are any easy questions, I'll answer them. But all the difficult stuff, I'll pass over to the Chief Inspector, as he far better understands and is far better able to deal with those things, I suspect. Ever was thus. Stuart is specifically going to present on county lines and knife crime overview in East Herts, which I think you'll find of interest. I know I certainly did, and he'll be able to answer substantively on that. Clearly, some of what he has is operationally sensitive, so we have ensured that the that the presentation is one which is appropriate for a public meeting. And I'm sure that if there were further questions which needed to be done on a redacted basis, I'm sure there would be ways through, but we need to reflect on the sensitivity in the meeting. I thought I might start, though, just by sort of giving some context, because broadly, the crime this year across the whole of Hertfordshire has seen a significant reduction for a number of reasons, not least those which affect people most, like domestic burglary, excuse me, like domestic burglary. As there have been far more people at home, domestic burglary has reduced significantly, which is good news. So there have been some very positive things which have come out from across the piece through COVID, and certainly capturing that significant drop-off in crime across the county, which we've seen in the last year, is something we need to do. And of course, we saw a reduction in crime the previous year. Some of that may well be around the fact that for domestic burglary, that people are also perhaps investing in things like Ring doorbells and all of those areas which help perpetrators of crime. And I very much hope that that is part of it, because I believe that we need to work closely together to ensure that people are not victims of crime. We need to work with everyone. We need to work across all of our different public sector tiers to ensure that we are working as one to ensure there are fewer victims of crime. And that's something I've been working really hard on for the last 8 years. I hope to continue working hard on it, but there is an election and we'll see what happens on the other side of that. But, you know, I really hope that I'll be around to continue to see that reduction in crime. And the other reason, I think, is that we are seeing more police officers now, and I'm looking forward to being around when we have more police officers than ever before. And clearly that will be important. But with that opportunity, we also need to reflect on how we're going to use those police officers, where they're going to go, how we're going to put them into each district across the county, how we're going to use that uplift, because we really need to make the most of that in terms of tackling crime. And I intend to do that. But that, I think, is an area that the Chief Constable and I are really quite excited about, that next stage, which we are talking about prevention first. So with that uplift of officers, we're looking at really a new way of ensuring that there are fewer victims of crime. And the brilliant thing about it is it's something which has worked so well in other parts of the public sector before. So if you look at fire and rescue, in the 70s, they really recognised that they needed to reduce the number of fires rather than increase the number of firefighters. They needed to find a way that there were fewer victims of fire. And they did that in a lot of ways. You know, some of it was by wonderful campaigns. Some of it was by making sure that people didn't have chips cooking on open fires and those sorts of things. Various campaigns which have been really successful, which have driven down the number of fires to a very low level now. And that's a far better way of ensuring that people are not injured, to make sure of safety of people. And we can use the same thing around prevention first in crime. And I think that what we will all need to agree to do is to work ever more closely in preventing crime and actually thinking about what is it you want in East Herts, making sure that we engage even more with councillors locally, with local leaders, to make sure that your vision and my vision is aligned and that we work together and put resources in together to reduce crime. And I think that's a really exciting potential that gives us a way forward, how we use that uplifted number of officers to ensure that there are fewer victims and that you're not receiving emails and I'm not receiving emails from people who say, if only I hadn't been the victim of crime. So I suppose that's the context I wanted to give for this evening, something perhaps to go away and think about, and we need to think about how we do that over the coming years. But I'm really quite excited and fired up about it. If I hand over to Stuart, you all know Stuart well, I'm sure. He's a brilliant chief inspector, really has got engaged in the various communities that make up East Herts, and really knows the patch well, and will be able to answer your concerns that you've had about crime. I know that some have come through earlier. He's well up to speed on that, but he felt compelled to do the piece which he'd heard about on county lines and knife crime, and I'll hand over to him now.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Can I just confirm you can hear me to start with?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, right, so I was asked to give a presentation on county lines and knife crime. I've previously given a presentation to elected members at East Herts, and this is a follow-up to that. So I am referring to a slide set that I shared through Peter earlier this week, and I am on now slide 2 for those that have the slides in front of them. This is an overview of the presentation, and it presents a positive picture. It's a refresh of data from March to October. What that shows is that we currently have 2 active county lines. One is mapped, which is a process through serious and organised crime colleagues into the regional crime units. One is unmapped because we are still developing the intelligence around that. What that shows is that knife crime is increasing since May, but there have been some very positive arrests, and that increase is on very low numbers, which you'll see a little later in the slide set. The presentation will show that knife crime is mainly in relation to the inferred possession of weapons, and when you see numbers in this presentation, they relate to the use of keywords. So knife or sharp object, which means that sometimes they are sharp objects, which could be nail files, which could be people smashing mirrors or smashing glass and picking up a piece of glass, as opposed to somebody actively being out in possession of a knife. So I'm going to move on to, unless anybody has any questions in relation to slide 2.
I can't see any hands, so it's probably best to just go through it, and then I think we'll have to ask questions at the end if you're happy.
Okay, yep, that's good. So slide 2 relates to the way that county lines are assessed, and we go by the CLICM matrix, which is the County Lines Intelligence Collection Matrix, and that shows that there is one active line in East Herts at the moment that is mapped through that CLICM process and the process that goes on behind it. And what that does is it means that intelligence is gathered from a number of agencies, both local, regional and national. And we are always taking action at a street local level with a view to collating the intelligence, pushing that through specialist resources that have been assigned at police headquarters, which deals with county lines across the county. And then that unit links in with the National Crime Agency and with other specialist departments. And the intelligence is shared with other forces, and what we try to do all the time is go upstream and arrest those that are responsible for the business model in the first place. So the organised crime group that sits behind the 14 to sort of 21-year-old that might then start running the drugs onto the street or being within a cuckooed address. Slide 4 refers to the two lines that I've mentioned. One of those lines, and each line gets a name based upon the intelligence and the name really that the users, the end user, calls it by, because that will be the number, that will be the name that comes up on their phones when the bulk text arrives, when a dealer arrives in town. So the first of those lines, the mapped one, relates to a line hitting Hertford and Ware. It says there it's being run from North London. It's predominantly Class A, so that's cannabis, heroin and cocaine. And that is one that has had a significant amount of disruption activity recently. The second line goes into Bishop Stortford. That was subject to significant disruption, and it actually slowed incredibly for a while, but it's back up. It's back up and running again. It's active. We are aware of the intelligence that sits behind it, and we are targeting that on a daily basis. And the bottom of the slide there shows the number of disrupted lines, which is the positive of this. It's a positive of this presentation because the investment of officers that Mr. Lloyd has referred to earlier has allowed me to strengthen my neighbourhood teams, which means that I've got an increase in intelligence on the front line. It also means that we've got the ability to work across partner agencies to use an escalated approach towards stopping the activity and reducing the vulnerability. But it's also allowed me to strengthen my proactive team, and I've got a permanent team of proactive officers that are engaged every day in collating intelligence and executing search warrants in relation to county lines and knife crime. Slide 5. These are all relatively wordy slides. I was quite happy with that because, of course, we've shared the presentation beforehand and you have a chance to read it. Other presentations I give, I tend to put minimal on the actual slide itself and talk to it. But what this very wordy slide says is that our offenders are increasingly local offenders. So whereas we were seeing people coming out from London and cuckooing addresses. Now, cuckooing is the taking over of the address of a vulnerable person to deal drugs from that address. That has been the trend for the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. But we're just starting to see a move away from that because we've been incredibly successful in targeting those cuckooed addresses, working to safeguard the individuals that were in them, and to, in most cases, close those premises down with the use of a closure order. But what this says is, this slide 5 says, is that we are seeing more people that are local, living local, that are actively dealing. It also says that knife crime linked to drugs has remained at a low level, as has knife crime overall. But as I said in that initial slide, knife crime has increased since the end of lockdown, but it's on very low numbers. Those lines that county lines that are coming into the district, though, do come in from North and East London, and what we're seeing is more of a trend towards taxis coming up, dropping off the drugs to locals, and the locals doing the dealing, as opposed to people travelling out from London and dealing themselves. I'm moving on to slide 6. This is an overview of possession. PWITS is the acronym we use for possession with intent to supply drugs. So that's class A and B. During the period which we're talking about here, which is initially from 2018 to March 2020, and then the refresh takes us up to the end of October, we've seen a reduction in offences of possession with intent to supply recorded within Athena. Now, Athena is the crime recording system. As it says there, it's not exclusive to East Herts, but we did see a reduction in activity throughout lockdown. Although what lockdown did was allow people to see what was happening in plain sight. So we had we had an increase in calls and an increase in intelligence around the use of drugs and potential addresses being used for dealing. Because of course people were working from home, they could smell drugs, whereas they would have been at work and they didn't smell that their neighbours were smoking drugs. They could smell it more, and they could also see activity that was out of the ordinary. So it's allowed us to focus our activity during lockdown and post-lockdown. The slide also says that our offenders are young. 60% of them are under 21 and 75% of them are under 25, which of course highlights a vulnerability in that they are young adults and in some cases children that are involved in this. Slide 7 is the previous data presented when I asked for this presentation to initially be created back in March. And that pretty much says what I've said already, which is around the age of the offenders and the fact that many of our offenders, suspects, are residents within Herts as opposed to travelling in. Slide 8 relates to cuckooed address intelligence. I've already said what a cuckooed address is. There, it says it in bold at the top there. Now, a very short summary of slide 8 would pretty much say we've had incredible success. We've had success in the way that we engage with the public, the way that we use an escalated approach using the tools given to us by the ASB Crime and Policing Act to have an escalated approach to trying to divert the occupants of these cuckooed addresses away from a criminal lifestyle, away from a lifestyle that makes them vulnerable, by engaging partners, by working through social landlords, by working with safeguarding professionals. But in most of the cases, because these people have incredibly chaotic lifestyles, whilst we try and maintain that support and safeguarding, our overwhelming focus needs to be on the antisocial behaviour and the impact that their activity has on their neighbours and those living within the slightly wider vicinity. So this slide shows that we've got a good level of intelligence in relation to cuckooed addresses. We have a very good process of sharing information with partners. We have an incredibly good process whereby we constantly visit addresses where we think we have vulnerable individuals, and we actually have a formal structured cuckoo matrix of people that we know that either have got high dependency levels, that have recently come back into the community from prison sentences, or have mental health issues, and so that's why it's important to share information with partners. And we have closed down 2 addresses there. The top 2. There's one in the Seal area and one in Stansted Abbots. And at the bottom of that slide, on the right-hand side there, it says that addresses in Bishop Stortford remain prevalent, with 4 addresses and over 5 intelligence logs regarding cuckooing. Parkview currently being the highest location. Well, you may have seen in social media and media posts recently that we have moved to a closure order in relation to Parkview as well. So positive, but I'll say that we remain working with partners to make sure that the individuals that are displaced are supported as best as possible. I'll move on to slide 9. This relates to knife crime. The first thing I'll say is it relates to, as I said at the start of this presentation, knife or sharp implement. So the grand total of 92 there, and this is between March and October this year, doesn't just relate to knives. And sometimes there is an inference that a knife is possessed, and on some occasions where it relates to robbery offences, those knives are not actually seen. It's just the inference that they have a knife. They might put their hand into their pocket, coat pocket, or down the front of their trousers to show that they're backing up the threat. But this is in relation to low numbers, as you'll see in the graph on the right-hand side. You can see the dip that we actually saw during lockdown, the increase post-lockdown, and a dip in activity that we are seeing now. How do I put that into numbers around possession of offensive weapon offences? Well, we've seen a 52% reduction year to date in comparison with last year. So that's 58 last year down to 28 this year. And a 38% reduction in robbery offences. That's 56 for the same period last year, to date, down to 35 this year. I'll move on then to slide 10. Slide 10 in the left-hand graph there. Again, note the left axis of low numbers. But this relates to knife crime suspects by age, and the graph on the right relates to knife crime victims by age. And you'll see that there is a spike in that 17 to 19 age group, or 17 to 18 age group. That has changed because it was previously 15 to 16 years. And that related to sort of robbery offences. If we're going to mention locations, it's sort of Saundersfield and Hartham during the warmer months, when robberies between younger people increase. We know that happens each year. We know that we put activity into those areas each year, and that we work through YCH youth services to have sort of outreach work going on. But that's moved up in age to 17 to 18 years. And what we've actually seen more recently is, although low in number, we've seen an increase in the actual use of violence involving knives, which is a worrying, very recent trend, but one in response to which we have taken swift and robust action, and we have 2 people currently on remand for an incident that happened back in November in Hertford Town Centre, and then rolled onto a linked incident up in the Seal area. As I say, some very swift and robust action in relation to that put 2 of the people behind it into prison on remand. And you may have seen recent media activity in relation to a stabbing incident on Saturday evening in Watton at Stone. What I can say in relation to that is that arrests have been made, and you'll see today that we have released the identity of the offender, who we are actively seeking as I speak now. Finally, I'm going to move on to the knife crime hotspots, and I think it would be common sense really that said that they would be focused over our major urban areas, so that they are focused on Hertford and Bishop Stortford. The other thing we need to take into account there is the fact that train lines go into those areas. You see the train line coming into both Hertford East and Hertford North, bringing slightly different issues, and the train line going into Bishop Stortford. I think I'll leave it there because the slides are pretty self-explanatory. As I've said already, they are very wordy. You've had a chance to read them, and I think you may have some questions. So that's it from me and my monologue.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Very interesting indeed. I can see if you do have any questions, if you can use your blue hand. I can see one blue hand up already. So, Jonathan.
Thanks very much. Stuart, you talked about people responsible for this, in some cases, being more local rather than from, say, London. Does that make it easier for you to track them down and prosecute, or does it make it harder?
It doesn't make a great deal of difference. I suppose it makes it easier to I think I'll just stick to it. Doesn't really make a great deal of difference because it just means that we have to do things a different way.
Okay, and in terms of the taxi companies that are ferrying these drugs around, again, are they from the area or are they from outside of the area?
Sorry, I use the term taxis. Sometimes they can be hire vehicles paid for by cash, and they're just drivers that are dropping people off. Uber drivers, where we get activity, where we get intelligence in relation to particular taxi firms, then we take activity with neighbouring forces upstream to target those companies.
And do you also inform the local authority who are doing the licensing in the first place?
Where they relate to taxi companies, yes, we do. But generally, this is it's hire cars being used and Uber drivers.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sophie's next.
So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for the swift response on Saturday evening, which has been noted by myself and other members in the village. I'm the district councillor for Watton at Stone, so obviously the incident on Saturday was of particular concern to me. The one question I do want to ask is, during pre-COVID times, I know the police tended to have a bit of a presence in secondary schools, which made them approachable to young members of our community that may be predisposed to crime or have knowledge of various criminal incidents. Can you confirm whether something like that is still taking place at the moment despite the COVID emergency? Because I think it's very important that our police officers are seen as approachable to young people, and that they have access to speak to them if they feel they need to.
Yeah, there are a couple of levels to that. We have incredibly good relationships with all the schools across the district, in mainly to the safeguarding leads. And so where we take that early intervention and diversionary activity through my community safety unit and through the PCSOs that are out there, that information is shared. We have a youth safety partnership involving the St Giles Trust and key safeguarding professionals that deal with individual risk. We, at the other level, we had been doing much more engagement into schools, both through primary with our mini police scheme and using cadets, volunteer police cadets, 13 to 17 years of age, and PCSOs going in to do talks to schools. Schools haven't wanted us to go in as much throughout the lockdown and throughout these difficult times, because they are all trying to manage their own. COVID risk assessments. They're not gathering. They're confined to bubbles. So our face-to-face activity within schools has reduced, but our contact with schools has not.
Thank you. You happy with that answer, Sophie?
Yeah, I mean, I just wondered whether there's been any thought to replacing the face-to-face contact with sort of like Zoom-based contact, just so that interaction obviously continues, because obviously it's been 8 months since the COVID emergency, 9 months now since the COVID emergency started, which is a whole academic year. So,
yes, but you can well appreciate that schools are pushed for curriculum time anyway, and you know, we were never blessed with a huge opportunity to get face-to-face activity, because you know, there was limited time to actually go and speak to the schools. But yes, we are looking to alternative means by which we can do that. And in fact, we're incredibly lucky that our Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Chris Bigland, is the national lead for the fire service for youth engagement. And through a product called Staywise, we in East Herts have been piloting that, which is an ability for key messaging to go into schools, and for lesson planned activity that's mapped against the curriculum already by the Department for Education is available to the teachers across all curricular subjects. So, you know, even if we are talking about knife crime, the lesson plan is there about knives and drugs and alcohol, and that could be weaved into PSHE, but it could equally be weaved into creative writing. So we are looking at new ways to do school engagement.
Brilliant, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. David Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chief Inspector, for your presentation. I just wanted to pick up on some of the statistics you had on the slides. On the knife crime numbers, you gave comparisons year on year. Could you maybe give a little bit of colour, maybe going a couple of years back from that? What is the actual trend we're seeing over the longer term?
Well, the data goes back to 2018 anyway. So any analysis back beyond that, we're seeing an increase, but on low numbers. But this data that builds this presentation goes back to 2018. So I didn't go back any further than that.
Is it worth perhaps, Stuart, expanding on that? The increase in knife crime numbers actually is often talked about within the constabulary as, the difference between good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. Because knife crime in itself is one of those crimes that tends to be 100% clear-up rate, in that it tends to be a way of seeing extra police activity. So, for example, if you were to do a lot more stop and search on the streets and came across people who were equipped with knives, that would be a crime, a knife crime. So knife crime in itself doesn't necessarily mean that this is an increase in the number of people who have been assaulted, who have been stabbed. It is an increase in the number of people who have been stopped with a bladed article. And as Stuart explained at the beginning, that could be anything from a piece of sharp glass to a knife to a number of other issues. So sometimes an increase in knife crime is actually a good thing, because it shows that there's been extra work by the police locally to stop people carrying knives. Would that be a reasonable explanation, Stuart? You have far more ability around these things than me, but broadly, is that right?
It is, and that's why I sort of pulled out the data in relation to possession of offensive weapons to sort of give a more sort of absolute figure there. So that's a 52% reduction in offences of possession of offensive weapons.
Are you happy with that, David?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. James Ragnall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both, David and Stuart. I've got just a sort of two-parter, really. The first one is obviously this, well, just how much crossover is there with the work done with the rail networks? Because I'm assuming this sounds like quite a multidisciplinary sort of approach that needs to be taken in reducing the rates and helping to stop the county lines especially. But also, how are the public engaging with ECHO and with the systems in place on that? Are they engaging fully with it, and is that throwing up some data that can be used moving forward as well?
Okay, I'll deal with the engagement with British Transport Police. We regularly conduct operations with British Transport Police. I'm trying to remember the name. We have a set operation, but whatever, I've forgotten. I've had a senior moment, but we regularly do that. We can do that as a long-term plan thing, planning in diarised activity with the use of passive drugs dogs as well to give us indications. But where we want to conduct slightly more covert activity, we might have uniformed officers outside working with revenue protection officers, and then we'd have plainclothes officers on the trains or on the platforms to identify people that are what they're called turnbacks, that will see what's going on and realise that they're going to get back on the train. So yes, we do have regular intelligence sharing with British Transport Police, and we also work through SASH, so the old TIS, Targeted Youth Support, and we look at sort of downloads of people's knowledge about areas and areas where young people feel threatened, and we focus on those areas. And what that's pulled up recently is the train line between Broxbourne and Hertford East, and so it necessarily means that we need to work with our colleagues down in Broxbourne, which we do, and we have regular proactive operations that work with our BTP colleagues across that entire line, and then pushing that up into Bishop Stortford as well, because of course at Broxbourne they can change and go up on the Bishop Stortford line. So not wanting to push that too much, because it's a positive picture. Echo is brilliant. It's part of our everyday business. We log on in our morning daily tasking meeting. We look at the insights that people are putting forward. My neighbourhood officers use that to understand where they might need to start focusing more in-depth public engagement activity. My 24/7 response officers use it to think where they might want to go and patrol if they get some downtime away from dealing with the call log demand. And my proactive officers are regularly taking the information that people are pushing through on insights and matching that with intelligence and information that they might find out about, and making sure that that is assessed, that it's appropriately dealt with, and it is pushed through and it's put onto an intelligent system so that it can subsequently be used. But what we've done through our youth strategy group, which is chaired by Mark Hughes from YCH Youth Services, is to take the results of the county-wide youth crime survey, because it wasn't specifically about crime, it's the county-wide youth survey, and to pick up on the crime elements of that around fear of crime. So we have now developed in East Herts our own bespoke East Herts Youth Echo, and that asks young people how safe they feel in the area in which they go to school, travel to school, live and socialise, and then it asks them to say why they feel safe or why they feel unsafe, with some qualitative free text information being specific about the areas in which they might feel unsafe, so that we can then match that with that activity that we're doing with SASH, and we can then problem solve areas that are subject to problems. So for example, one of our Ware priorities is Ware Priory, and the area around moves to sort of St Mary's Church, and then up towards up Watton Road to Asda and the Berryfields Park there, and we know then that we have to work with Asda, we have to work with Chauncey School, that we have to work with East Herts Council, and we work across partners to make sure that we target the area as well as the individuals that are coming out of the intelligence. So a long way of answering. Echo is brilliant. Echo really does give us insight, and it's a very simple to use system.
Thank you very much. Mary's next. So I'll see your hand up, Norma. I will come to you, but Mary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologise for being late. I found it difficult to log in. Can I ask what action is being taken regarding the known cuckooed addresses? I know one address in Seal was subject to closure this year, but what's happening regarding the ones that the police know that are active?
We take an escalated approach with partners. So we use the ASB Crime and Policing Act. We execute warrants where we have relevant intelligence to be able to do that. We make sure that they are on patrol plans of officers. We make sure that we land community voice events in those areas. So we had a SEAL community voice event in Norwood recently, where we try to gather further insights about the impact of crime and disorder, and we try and work with the local residents to become more resilient, and to maybe form residents associations and start problem solving with us, and taking their own problem solving further forward. But I've got to say, you know, you close one address, and because people are still vulnerable, and people capitalize on that vulnerability, criminals capitalize on the vulnerability, it moves with the vulnerability, so we then have to start the process again. And all the time we are reliant upon the social landlords, the housing associations, who rather unfortunately during lockdown have furloughed a lot of their frontline staff and have reduced investment in the front line. And it is becoming increasingly difficult, and it is pushing demand towards district council housing colleagues, community safety colleagues, policing. And there is a lot of activity that could be and should be undertaken by social landlords at that very early intervention and diversion level. You know, so it's an uphill battle, but it's one that we're continually fighting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, now I know Holly and then Norma, then I've got a couple of questions. Can we please keep the questions and answers quite brief, because we are coming up to 8 o'clock, so not Holly.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I just have two quick questions. The first is in relation to knife crime. I wondered if there was data to show the split between the stop and search and the offences, just to see how effective stop and search may or may not have actually been. And the second question is in relation to domestic burglaries. Obviously, due to the pandemic, we know that everyone's lifestyles have changed and people have been at home more, which has obviously caused a dip in those offences, which is great. But as the world returns to normal in the next few months, is there a plan to run a campaign, or maybe just start to ramp up the kind of educational side of home security so that people are ready for what may be a peak in that again as we come back to leaving our homes more?
Okay, I'll have to come back to a future meeting around the stop and search and offences of knife crime for specifics, but we do regularly review stop search. It's part of a meeting that I had earlier today around things such as disparity of disproportionality of stop search across BAME and the positivity rate, i.e. how successful are we in the use of the tactic of stop search to actually detecting an offence. I have that data, but I don't have it immediately to hand, and I'm conscious of the time, but I can come back to you on that one.
Is it worth saying? I mean, I think you've already said, but is it worth saying there is a specific stop and search overview panel? Stuart, as Chief Inspector of East Herts, is required once a year to go to that panel to review all stops and searches that have been made. It's chaired by a retired judge, and in the administration of it comes out of my office. I'm also held to account on stop and search by the police and crime panel on a regular basis, and the statistics are out there. Broadly, what we have seen has been there are issues around disproportionality, both in terms of those people who are stopped. So you are proportionately more likely to be stopped if you are a black male under the age of 25 than if you are a white female over the age of 65, for example. And there is a disproportionality in that in terms of numbers. We watch that very closely. The disproportionality that I'm particularly concerned about is that you are more likely in the whole country. We've only had 2 murders, thankfully, in Hertfordshire this year, 2 homicides in Hertfordshire this year, but you are more likely in this country to be murdered, something like 9 times more likely if you are a young male black than if you are a young male white. That disproportionality we've really got to get underneath and find out about. And some of the stop and search figures help around that.
Thank you. Does that answer all your questions, Holly?
There was one that just around burglary, domestic burglary.
Yeah.
Every year, the burglary plan is well, it's reviewed quarterly, but I have a big focus on that in August, where we start to look at towards the darker months. We've bucked the trend in East Herts, actually, which is rather annoying because when you look at domestic burglary, it also groups into it the burglary of sheds and non-attached garages. And unfortunately, at the start of lockdown, we had a 2 to 3 month period whereby we were subject to a crime spree over an extended period of time. And so we're only just starting to show reductions. We're actually running a fair increase in domestic burglaries, but not house burglaries as one would traditionally think. These were the burglaries of sheds targeting predominantly bikes and tools, push bikes and tools. But we identified that, we took some action, and that has stopped. But it's taken us a time to get back to a level to show an overall reduction. But we do regularly review plans. We always push out messaging through OWL. I had a meeting earlier today with the Mercury, and my neighbourhood inspector, Chris Hunt, meets regularly with the Bishop Stortford Independent, and we always share activity. So today's conversation was about the start of a small series of burglaries in Ware that are of garages where things like push bikes are being taken between sort of 3 and 3:30 a.m. So along with directed patrol activity from police officers, we push information out through OWL to the households across East Herts and where necessary across the whole county, and we then match that with corresponding publicity and information out through our neighbourhood watches.
Thank you. Norma, you wanted to have a quick question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Stuart.
Hello, Norma.
Hi. Just wanted to say it's brilliant. We've got such a bunch of dedicated officers in East Herts. They're absolutely fantastic and work really hard. I was just going to say that I know about Parkview, as you obviously know, but all that's happened is, yes, it's been shut down, but now East Herts have had to temporarily house them because of the temperature outside, and the government says they have to. And the time it takes and the paperwork it takes to get a closure is absolutely incredible. And I wondered if anything can be done about that.
That's an incredibly difficult question to answer, Norma, but I could give a very simple answer. Yes, something can be done about it, and stuff is constantly done about it. We have to take into account the wider impact of the harm against the local residents and the antisocial behaviour that they are then victim of because of that dealing activity. So we don't want to take the ultimate action of a closure order because we know that it makes somebody homeless. But if we aren't getting engagement from social landlords to take responsibility, and people will not, because of chaotic lifestyles, take the help that is offered through health colleagues who are also involved in the wider problem solving, then we have to take that ultimate sanction of a closure order, because the detriment of others will always overcome the disruption to the individual. But we've also got to deal with the safeguarding of that individual as well, and we can't just make them homeless and put them out on the street, because what we learned in the very early days of just using closure orders was that if they are homeless, all they'll do is sofa surf in the local area, and then it makes it incredibly difficult to actually track down where the activity is happening, because it's constantly moving.
No, I have no problem. My thing, what I was trying to say, Stuart, was, thank you so much, because the residents there, of which I know quite a lot, because they have learning disabilities, have had 2 years of absolute misery. That was all.
I think that's.
And
I
I'm
think
glad
that's-
it's happened.
Thank you. I think that's understood. Quick question, actually, to David. I mean, you were mentioning that we have extra police officers. I think you actually said that we'll soon have more than we've ever had before. Do you know how many more we've got in East Harts?
No, I can't tell you today how many more you've got. I haven't broken it down, but actually probably that answer you'll have at your fingertips, Stuart, how many extra you've got from over the last couple of years. And of course, we've got another 93 coming in this year, which will probably work out at about 9 or 10 in East Harts. But how many extra have you got in your team? Before he answers that, one of the problems that people have in trying to understand how policing works is that they feel that the neighbourhood team is where it all goes on. Of course, in any neighbourhood, you've also got the backup of those more centralised teams, whether that's across the three forces like roads policing units, whether or not that's dogs units, whether or not that's the more centralised intervention teams, rapid response teams, or if you're talking about neighbourhood teams. And sometimes there can be some confusion, and sometimes people deliberately confuse those numbers when they're trying to say there aren't many police officers or whatever. Really, in terms of the police officers, you want to be looking at the sort of the 2,000 and some police officers across the whole of the organisation rather than what's in one district team. But having said that, that's allowed you to look up the numbers, Stuart.
Yeah, I knew the numbers. So the breakdown is that I've had 23 officers come into me during the course of the last sort of 18 months. Some of those officers have filled gaps in establishment that where we were under establishment before, but the recent influx has allowed me to add 4 additional officers to my safer neighbourhood teams, and with the most recent influx of officers, whereas my establishment numbers were 10 officers per, because there are different types of cops that we have on the front line. So we have the 24/7 response, and I've got 5 teams of those with 2 sergeants and 10 PCs on each of the team, plus an inspector. And then I've got the neighbourhood teams across the 4 neighbourhoods. So short answer, 10 plus 4, 14 additional over and above what I did have when I took over. And what that's allowing me to do is increase my capacity at neighbourhood level, and it is allowing me to push new student officers through my proactive team for a 5-week shift rotation, which gives them a wealth of experience that they can then take back. It bolsters their confidence and professionalism around the use of stop search. And in the coming months, it's also going to allow me to push student officers for slightly longer shift rotation through my detective local crime unit, which will give them appreciation of how to case build and build professional investigations. But it's also allowing me to staff a patrol function, a response patrol function from Buntingford Police Station. So that's really positive. In preparation for that, I've had a taser armory built up there. I've got a dedicated response vehicle up there now. I've had 10 lockers installed, so there'll be 2 officers from each team going to be permanently based from there as a response base, which I'm hoping is going to free up the neighbourhood officers in Bunting, because of course we're dealing with this 20% increase in population that we're seeing, and we need to increase the ability of our neighbourhood teams and our response capability to answer the increasing demand of calls that 20% uplift in population is bringing with it.
Thank you very much. I mean, so 14 police officers, 14 extra police officers in East Hearts, I think is excellent news. It's always good to end on a positive. So thank you very much to both of you. It's been very interesting, very informative, and you're more than welcome to stay, but I'm sure you've got other things that you wish to do this evening, so I will let you go. Thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you for inviting, and very good to be here. Thank you.
Just to sort of note the presentation, basically. That's just a formality, really. Just sort of note it, which you've kind of done.
Yeah, we're happy to note everything. Yeah, great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Item 6, the draft work programme. Peter.
Yeah, I've got something to read out from Lorraine, so I'll just read it out. This is the usual consolidated work programme, which has summarised both the work of Overview and Scrutiny Committee and Audit and Governance Committees. Members will note that there will be a joint meeting of OS and ANG on the 12th of January 2021 to consider the budget 2021 to 22 and the medium-term financial plan 2021 to 24. Going forward in February 2021, following consideration of the parking recommendations by the Executive on 24th November, a report will be presented providing a summary of what was agreed. It is also anticipated that the annual scrutiny report will be presented to members for consideration. Members will be aware that there was a scrutiny workshop presented by Ian Parry from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny on the 3rd of December. This provided members with an opportunity to consider their final report and to ask questions. One particular thread running through the report, and which formed part of the recommendations, was the need to hold the Executive and not officers to account for the decisions it makes, focusing on strategic issues rather than having items merely for discussion. This should mean fewer, if any, reports presented by officers. The CFGS said that any early intervention and becoming closely aligned to what the Executive was doing played an important role in ensuring a strategic approach to scrutiny, including the need to be the voice of the public, quote unquote. The importance of the forward plan containing key decisions to be taken by the Executive over a 3-month period was stressed, and that early intervention challenge was the key to good scrutiny. It was also stated how important it was to understand the journey of the decision. If this was started early, it placed scrutiny members in a better position to question and challenge, the aim being to improve the provision of services and to make savings. Mr. Parry suggested that Executive members should be invited to attend a meeting of OS to answer questions about policies and strategy, not just about performance, guided by both past and future decisions. Members should note that a 3-monthly meeting is to be held with the Chairman and the Vice Chair of both OS and ANG to consider the work programmes of both committees in the context of the forward plan. The Scrutiny Officer, Lorraine, will be discussing with key officers how best to take the CFGS recommendations forward. And that's what Lorraine asked me to read.
Thank you very much. Very well read, thank you. Are members happy to note the draft work programme and Peter's comments?
Ultimately, to agree the work programme, unless there's anything they want to add. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, mine is proposing that. Is anyone second? Norma. I think everybody's happy there. Obviously, if you do have any topics that you wish to add on to the work programme, you can always email and, you know, officers will have a look at it.
Email who? I didn't hear that.
Well, if you email the officers and copy myself and mine, Ian,
you can email me or Lorraine, whichever. Yes, or
right.
Will.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank
okay,
you
is that agreed, the work programme?
Yeah, I think everyone voted. Yeah, that's agreed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Urgent items. I don't have any urgent items, in which case I will wish you all a good evening, and I probably won't see you, well, I might see you at full council before Christmas, but if I don't, I wish you all a